Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Corzine. I am the founder of SimpleFringe. SimpleFringe is a software platform designed to help government contractors with SCA contracts better administer the health and welfare or the fringe portion of those SCA requirements. And I'm joined today by Jenny Clark with Solvability.
Well, hey there, Matt. Hey, everybody, I'm Jenny Clark with Solvability, and I've been working with defense contracting, other federal contracts for a very, very long time. And Matt was introduced to me by somebody else, and we've been getting together saying there is something we could work together in talking to people about Service Contract Act issues, how it's operated, and then also the financial side, because that's my angle. What you got to say today, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed these conversations because my experience running a fringe administration firm has really been focused on the compliance side. So I'm learning a lot on the pricing and cost side of it. And today we're going to talk about this question of, is the SCA Health and Welfare a direct cost or a fringe pool cost? And because most small contractors make an accounting decision on day one that they never revisit, and it quietly affects their wrap rates, their bid rates, and their DOL audit if there ever is one. And today, Jenny, you and I are going to break down one of those decisions, which is this: where does the SCA Health and Welfare actually live in the contractor's books? So
Well,
before we jump in, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jenny.
Well, I was just going to say, Matt, that's such an important question because they make a decision when they do the bid and then they get the contract. They set it up however they thought to and not thinking about what's my administrative cost? What is it going to take? Am I actually making money when I finish doing the contract?
Yeah, yeah. Easy to set it and forget it, if you will. Before we jump into the cost side of it, I thought it would be helpful just to provide a little bit of foundation around the SCA Health and Welfare, otherwise known as the SCA Fringe. So just for some background, SCA Health and Welfare, otherwise known as the Fringe or the Fringe rate, it is not a discretionary benefit. What that means is it is a per hour cash obligation set by what's called the wage determination. As of July of last year, the standard rate is $5.55 per hour, but most contracts at this point are subject to the Executive Order 13706, which is paid sick leave. And when that executive order applies, the health and welfare rate drops to $5.09 per hour because the cost of paid sick leave is accounted for separately. So, for example, if your employee works 100 hours on an EO 13706 contract, you would owe that employee $509 in fringe or in health and welfare. Now, importantly, from the DOL perspective, the Department of Labor does not care how contractors code it in their chart of accounts. The DOL does care that each covered employee has received that full entitlement, that full fringe, for every covered hour worked. But the compliance trap that we've seen over the years is that contractors pool their health and welfare with the other fringe benefits, report it as a pool rate, and then cannot show on an employee by employee or hour by hour basis that the obligation was met. And that's what tends to get contractors in trouble. Jenny, I'm curious from your side, what are the two ways, and we've got a good visual here, that a contractor can actually structure this?
That's a great question, Matt. I've seen it done both ways, and there's actually a couple of variations on this. Some organizations say, well, because whenever they work, I pay them the $5.09 per hour, and there's some rules about what hours you pay and when you do it. Um, they see that as something that's just like they're charged to the contract they're working on, and they'll say that's a direct cost to the contract. It's a direct cost to the contract technically, because when you have something that you can identify is caused by the contract, it's a direct cost. It's like, if we didn't have this contract, I wouldn't have SCA, so it could be a direct cost. So it's a legitimate way to do it. And that way it shows up just like your direct labor expense does in your direct cost on your profit and loss statement. And depending on how you do the billing, sometimes it's you have a fixed price contract, it wouldn't matter. If you've got cost plus contracts, it actually be a line item, usually on your billing. It's really a good way to do it because it is going to make the obligation stay visible to the employee. And that's a really important part of setting this up. You got to be able to show on their paycheck that you paid it and
Yep.
how you account for it. That's the biggest part of it. It's not that paying, it's the reporting for it. You have to be able to demonstrate that compliance in a Department of Labor audit. And that means they're going to come in, take a look at your payroll, ask some questions, and they're going to verify by tracing those costs from the employee's timesheet to the actual payment on a payroll journal. If you do it as a direct cost, it doesn't affect the fringe rate at all, so it doesn't inflate the fringe rate. And it may be the best fit if you've only got one SCA contract, it may be the easiest way to do it, or everything that you do is under Service Contract Act. So it's simpler to offend. Option B, though, is an indirect pool. So health and welfare, and I also see it called cash in lieu if they're paying it as cash, is part of your benefits. And what they're really saying is, hey, we just want to make sure that the people on this contract get paid this amount of statutory benefits because that's what the government says they should get. And so if you think about indirect costs or fringe benefits, there's usually Social Security and Medicare, there's leave, there's health insurance. You might have all of your employees under the same fringe pool. If you have Service Contract Act employees, the question is, you would charge the health and welfare portion to the fringe pool, and that would work. It is traceable because you showed it on their paycheck. You just showed where the cost is going on your chart of accounts and your profit and loss. But here's what's tricky about an indirect fringe pool. If you've got a bunch of employees that are SCA contract employees and others that just have a regular corporate benefits plan, sometimes because the SCA fringe benefits are usually higher as a percentage of their wages, sometimes that's not financially a good decision. And it does require some tracking. But I think you're right about everything you're saying. And Matt, what I'm interested in is you were talking about how important it is to look at your options of how you pay that fringe and the reporting of it, right?
Yep, absolutely. So using the example of providing all of the fringe or all the health and welfare as cash, the most important thing to remember is that amount needs to be shown as a separate earnings code on the pay stub. It cannot just be added to or blended in with the hourly wages, because the Department of Labor will effectively, even though you might have done that math to include it with the hourly wage, they don't view it that way, and they would require the contractor to go back and pay the health and welfare separately. And then the second thing is just being mindful of doing the reconciliations in a timely manner if you are a contractor providing both benefits and the shortfall, if you will, in cash or cash in lieu. So those reconciliations really need to be done no less frequently than monthly. And that's where the SimpleFringe software can be helpful at times, which is if you're doing that on an Excel spreadsheet and it's a manual, tedious, and error-prone process, the software that we're building will be of great assistance because it'll streamline that process, make it audit-proof, and give you just a nice, reliable record to point to for your employees and potentially for the DOL.
Well, Matt, I'm interested in that because I've
Yeah.
seen those spreadsheets. I've had to use them before,
Yeah.
where we would have a list of all the employees. We'd have the hours that they had worked for the month or whatever the period was. We'd have the health and welfare dollar of $5.09 or whatever it is now. And then we would look at where they opted in for some benefits and we took that deduction against it. And what you're trying to do is allow for how much is left over.
Yep, that's exactly it. And the challenge is, even though the benefit costs might be relatively constant, the hours that the employee works each pay cycle are going to often vary from pay stub to pay stub. So you've got to do those calculations on a rinse and repeat method and make sure you get it right. Employees are very attuned to not getting all of the fringe or the health and welfare that they are due. So you want to get it right every time.
Well, and nobody really wants to have a Department of Labor audit, honestly.
No, no. I mean, the Department of Labor are those auditors or investigators in the wage and hour division are humans. You have to remember that they investigate a whole slew of things, not just SCA Health and Welfare, but when they do investigate health and welfare, it is the most complicated thing um, financially and mathematically that they look at. And so the easier that you can make your explanations, right, in terms of the spreadsheets or the reports that show compliance, the better your audit is going to go. Because oftentimes there's no harm being done. It's just in a situation where the contractor needs to demonstrate compliance in a really clear and consolidated way, and there's good ways to do that.
Well, I would certainly not want to be doing it in a spreadsheet if there's a tool out there that could automate that.
Yeah, that's kind of the origin idea behind SimpleFringe. There are obviously firms out there that will do that work for you, but we believe that the calculations are I'm not going to say complicated, but they are complicated enough to require a template and a system that will walk you through them and make sure you get them right every time, particularly if it's something that someone is doing in an Excel spreadsheet manually each cycle.
Well, and so often people have questions about it, and being able to reach out to you and get some guidance on that is really important because you just know all of this. So I guess what we want people to do is everybody know this is Matt Corzine. If you do have questions about SCA, health and welfare, reporting, things like that, set up a demo with him and find out what he's got going on. He'd be glad to answer your questions.
Thank you, Jenny. And yeah, everyone can find me at simplefringe.com. And Jenny, thank you again for, as always, making me smarter around the cost and side of things. And I know people can find you at solvability.com. Is that right?
That is right.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you again, and we will reconnect in our next session.